The best herbal medicine always starts with the best ingredients. And of course, growing your own and using plants that you've loved and tended to is 100% ideal. And it takes a lot of time and energy, and sometimes you won't be able to grow things in your region. So after that, the next thing I recommend is finding a organic herb farmer and supporting them. My favorite organic herb farmers are Oshala Farm down in Southern Oregon. They are mind-blowingly amazing. Like when you order their herbs and you smell them and you look at the vitality and freshness of the plants, you will be like, what have I been using all these years? And you'll never want to turn back from them. And that being said, they are hosting Herb Camp this summer, where you can have the opportunity to sleep under the stars among fields of calendula and echinacea and bee balm. And not only that, you're going to get to take herb classes with so many amazing herbalists. And there is just nothing like a gathering of plant people, a gathering of herbalists with all this oozing love and joy and compassion among the plants. It's a magic like no other. And tickets for Herb Camp are closing very, very soon. I believe it's June 2nd. So if you haven't got your tickets and you're really thinking you could use that kind of energy to lift your spirits and walk away feeling amazing, get your Herb Camp tickets now. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the show notes for you. And I can't wait to frolic through fields of medicine with you. Welcome to The Herbalist Path, a podcast that's all about helping herbalism spread like wildflowers. I'm Mel, a clinical herbalist, environmental educator, and a mama who's been walking this path for well over 20 years. I created this show to help you feel confident with herbal medicine. You're going to get a blend of how-to episodes, incredible guest experts sharing their wisdom, and real talk about using herbs every day. All to help you care for your family naturally, take better care of our precious planet, and maybe even become the trusted herbalist in your own community. You see, this work isn't just about the herbs. It's about healing ourselves. It's about caring for each other, and it's about living in deeper connection with the earth. So whether you're blending your first tea, making your first tincture, or feeling called to be the go-to herbalist in your community, welcome. You belong here. You are right on time, and you are on the herbalist path. Hello, and welcome back to another episode on the herbalist path. I feel like it's been forever since I've done an episode, but I'm really excited about today's guest. His name is Logan Keister, and he's somebody
It's Keister.
Oh, darn it. We'll start it all over. Sorry. I should have asked you that beforehand. People always ask me, and I never think to do that. So I apologize.
No worries.
So I'll start that again. Hello, and welcome back to another episode on the Herbalist Path. I am really excited to dive into today's conversation because honestly, I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm so excited to connect and get to know and introduce to you and myself our guest, Logan Keister, who lives in Oregon, very close to my mom, who's a fellow clinical herbalist, a major nature lover, from what I gather, a very brilliant and passionate person, really loving to connect other people with nature and plants. So I'm excited to have you, Logan. I'm really grateful that you're here, and I can't wait to get to know you more. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you kindly. Well, that was a very wonderful introduction. I'm very humbled by that.
Well, I can't wait to hear more of you. So maybe if I ever get you on the show again, I can have more distinct things to say and know more about you. So I'm just excited to get to connect and hear your story, because just before we hit record, there were so many things I was like, oh, I could connect with this human. He sounds fabulous. So I know that you're in No Tai, Oregon, and I just shared with you a little story how that was the first town that I accidentally moved to when I first moved to Oregon in 1999. But you're born and raised there, right?
Yeah, I am. It's kind of like the basis of where I come from, and my whole herbal practice is very bioregional from this place. I've obviously lived in some other places, but usually within close proximity to where I grew up, besides a short stint in Washington.
Mhm.
But it's just like really for me, that's like my connection to place really like informs my practice of herbalism. So yeah, it's
Mm.
why I named my company No Tai Botanica.
Yeah, I love that. I was always such a nomadic child growing up, and my father was in the Air Force, and I was born in Germany and lived all over the country. But when I finally came to Oregon, I was like, oh, roots. And then I moved to the Mount Hood area about almost 17 years ago and was like, home. And I had never felt that. So I kind of have a bit of envy for you in that. And I don't know if envy is the right word, but I love that for you. And, it's a beautiful area that you're around. And I know, like, out that Triangle Lake Road, there's so many cool houses, and my partner and I will always drive around there and be like, "Ooh, look at all that land!" It's just gorgeous. So, I would love to hear a little bit more from you. I also know Noti as a logging town because when I first moved there, I lived right across the road from a lumber mill, and it hurt my little hippie earth loving heart to see it every day. But I know it's a part of Oregon's economy and all of that. But it just makes me curious how it was growing up in Noti and how you got such a deep connection to the plants and became the herbalist that you are today.
Yeah. So yeah, like you mentioned, there's a big timber industry in Oregon, and especially in Noti, a lot of people I grew around worked in the timber industry. And there's certain things obviously that's kind of hard to see, like what we think of as forest actually being like more of a forest farm, because it's like lots of these replants of just Douglas fir that's designed to grow back. But on the other hand, Oregon has 65% public lands. Like that means that they're just lands that anyone can go to, anyone can access. You can go out there, you can go foraging, you can go fishing, you can go hunting. You have this kind of freedom to really utilize these spaces, where in places like Texas, I think it's like less than 10% of the lands are public. And so you're kind of, unless you have access to private land. So I feel for me, having parents who were thankfully really took advantage of that. We drive like a few minutes down the road or even walk in our backyard. We had access to just thousands of acres of public land. And, we were very into mushroom foraging, when I was growing up as like just like a dorky family activity. And then later on, I realized like, oh, actually people think mushroom foraging is cool. I thought it's just something, a lame activity you do with your parents. I mean, I loved eating mushrooms. So, but, I learned a lot of the edibles at a very early age, just picking wild berries, salal, salmon berries, thimbleberries, huckleberries, and just foraging like quite a large variety of my mushrooms. My dad was pretty adventurous in the kind of species that we'd work with. And so it kind of just started from there, just growing up in this area where you had lots of access to public lands. And it's interesting too, because, you see different sides of how timber harvest affects an area. So for instance, right after clear cut, it's like, it's pretty desolated. There's not much going on. It's like whole areas, but you come back in like ideally 3 to 5 years later, the deer just go nuts. Like it opens up the sunlight and it creates all this forage. And you'll just see tons of deer and elk tracks going through the forest there, and start seeing all these different species. And then you get to watch the succession as, it starts out with like lots of blackberries and kind of these disturbance species. And then kind of you can see its succession as, because then we also have lots of old growth too. And you can kind of see how the old growth forest at first, sometimes they'll get really these dense forests that you can hardly throw a stick through. They're just like so dense that the forest can hardly breathe, and there's like almost no ground cover. But then you get to see like from bare ground to dense forest to like the big clear cut, the big old growth, where you get like this, little patches of sunlight hitting the forest floor, and you get this huge diversity, wild calypso orchids and trilliums. And so just kind of growing up in that just kind of really gave me an interesting and unique perspective on ecology and what it means to live with wild foods in your life.
I love all of those stories and like picturing the different variations of the forest here in Oregon and throughout the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it's very similar forest, at least when you're west of the Cascades, for sure. Seeing that clear cut and thinking about, oh gosh, there's nothing there, and if you don't know much about it, you could be very heartbroken. But then to see, yeah, when it does start growing, it's very, very thick and you can't throw anything through it. And I think about the old growth forest near me along Salmon River in the Mount Hood National Forest and the incredible plant life down below with that little glimpse of sunshine. It's you just painted a beautiful picture, made me very happy. So thank you. Um, it's really incredible. And then like hearing and learning about the stories of your parents and how blessed you were to have parents that did love to take you on those kinds of adventures. It took me back to when I first moved to Oregon and I lived with my sister and brother-in-law. And my brother-in-law was taking mycology courses at the U of O and taught me a lot about mushroom hunting. And it was so cool. And I think about a lot of the places we went out by where you live and some amazing mushrooms to forage for. And my daughter is in love with salmonberry. It's her favorite berry. I don't know why. I don't find them to be very flavorful, but she absolutely loves them. And I just love to teach her about Rubus spectabilis and how it's got these spectabilis butterfly wings on the leaves and all the fun ways that we can teach children about these plants and these amazing things that we do have readily available. And when we learn that connection and that love and that trust with the land, it's a connection that I feel that not a lot of people are fortunate to have. And it is definitely a fortune, right? It's a fortunate thing. And I want to see more people have that. And I know one thing, as we were chatting about having you on this show, we talked about how you do outdoor school also with kids around Oregon. And that's kind of my background is environmental and experiential ed and working with kids outdoors. And I would love to just hear a little bit more about that from you. Like, kids are brilliant and they ask great questions and they're, usually fairly fascinated within nature. And I'd just love to hear some more of your experience in working with kids outside and getting them to foster that connection a little bit more than maybe they would have without guidance.
Yeah. So a lot of people may not be familiar with the fact that Oregon is one of the few states that has part of our lottery funding go to fund outdoor education for every either fifth or sixth grader throughout the entire state of Oregon. So that's a really unique thing that Oregon has. So I've been working in the outdoor education with kids the past year or so. So it's been something kind of new because I've always worked with adults and I kind of had to learn that teaching kids is totally different than adults. I can just do a 3-hour lecture on, like herbal formulation and have like adults attentively taking notes and looking at me and asking me questions. With kids, you really got to be very hands off. Like, how can I talk as little as possible and get as much like action and engagement and activities as possible? Mm-hmm. And so for myself, I was very, I guess what you say, blessed, which honestly was normal not that long ago. I talked to my parents and even places that just, you just let your kids run around in the woods and the back 40, wherever, and they just hang out outside all day. And that's kind of something that's been kind of lost. And it's been really interesting seeing, because with the program I work with, Coil Outside, is we go to lots of underserved communities that wouldn't have outdoor school because they don't have like the funds or finances to put in their own program to hire their own educators. So we'll go out to a lot of rural schools and some other schools that may have a high Hispanic population that may not have access to those kind of resources. And it's been really interesting because you meet these kids and some of them will be like your kid, like, oh my God, how'd you learn all these plant names? Your kid's raising you right. We were talking a little bit off recording about that. But a lot of it, I'm just been like super like surprised, like how little kids actually spend outdoors. Like, it's been kind of shocking. Like, wow, like these kids live in Oregon and they don't own a raincoat. And,
Yeah.
even the schools, like I even talked to some of the school people, like we provide free raincoats for any kid who wants them. The parents just won't go and accept them just due to pride and things like that. And so just really the parents aren't taking their kids outside a lot. And it's just like, how little knowledge there is of the plants. And it's like, it's surprising to me because I just kind of grew up doing wild foods, and you give a kid and they're like, like even something like a plum tree growing in a park, and, you're like, here kids, let's see some of these plums. And they're like, I had a kid tell me like, I didn't know you could eat like food that grew outside, like things that came off a tree. Like it was their first time eating like a piece of fruit off of a tree. And it's just like, and I don't blame these kids. It's really us as parents, as adults, who are really failing our kids. And just like, and you see them, they're getting pumped full of sugar, when it comes to snack and lunchtime, the school lunches are just so packed full of just simple carbs and sugars. And these kids are like, oh, you have ADD, ADHD. And kids are identifying with all these titles, and they're given lots of medications and fed lots of sugar and spending no time outside. So it's been interesting, being able to like get kids who are interested, because I teach a lot of outdoor skills. I teach a lot of foraging because that's a lot of my forte, but, I'm also really into fishing and hunting. So I teach kids about how to tracking animals. And it's really cool when you see this kid just all of a sudden like, oh, wow, this is something I can do. Because none of these skills, they don't require any money. You don't have to have any special gear to be able to follow animal tracks or to pick wild plants or to even like, design like your own traps and things like that, using sticks and carving your own traps with your knife and stuff. So it's been pretty cool just being able to allow kids access to this new knowledge they wouldn't otherwise have, and kind of just lets me see the state of the world and where we're at right now, and where, I've been kind of inspired more, with like all the political stuff going on in the world right now. And speaking with my boss, Dan Coyle, who's just an awesome guy. He's just like, man, we just need to be like, stop focusing on ourselves. Like for a lot of us adults, it's like too late. For these kids, it's not too late. Like they're really our future. And so when we're like thinking about where we're going to be allocating money, it's like we really need to be allocating a lot more resources to our kids, and like how can we actually make these kids grow up to be healthy and happy and functional individuals in this always changing climactic world. So
Yeah, I have so much to say on everything you were just sharing there, but it also takes me, I believe it was Whitney Houston, I believe the children are our future. You teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Thankfully, I'm not singing it, but I love those lyrics. And when I was a kid, I lived in between a library and a church in the state of Nebraska. And so I'd play in their big, beautiful yards all of the time. And I remember I would sing that song from the top of my lungs on the stairs of the church. And as I continued to grow and my connection to nature and my awe with nature continued to grow, I don't know that my parents ever really made the correlation that that was what was happening. Like our family vacations were camping trips and whatnot. But then as I became an adult and I started to learn more, like how I truly felt this literal sense of awe when I was in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, and when I moved across the country to Oregon, where I was just like, whoa, this is really, really beautiful. And around a little bit later, the book Last Child in the Woods came out. And I just remember saying, well, that can't happen. Like, we really need to do what we can to get more of these kids outside. And it's really the underserved populations that need it even more. Like we were talking about your childhood, you grew up with this gift. You have had it there for you all of the time. I think about my daughter. She's had it there for her all the time. And my daughter's in 6th grade, so she did do the Oregon Outdoor School at the beginning of the year with Coyle. And I remember the teachers there were like, wow, these kids really get it, and I live in a mountain community, and most of the parents up here are very outdoorsy and really love to embrace the incredible beauty of nature that we have. And so, the teachers were like, this crew is great. And listening to you talk about how you serve more of the underserved population there that doesn't have that gift and connection and understanding that food comes from plants, food comes from outdoors, and we can just grab that, and grab it in a sustainable fashion, one where we are thinking about how are those things going to come back for them next year and the next year and the next year. It's an amazing thing to try and connect, and a challenging thing to try and connect. Like, how do we foster that for more of these children? Like, it also takes me to one of the children. My daughter plays basketball, and we were on our way to a basketball game over in Hood River, which is an incredibly gorgeous drive to go over Mount Hood. And as we were doing it, we went by a very famous place on Mount Hood. Like, it's on TV screens. It's White River Canyon. It's stunning. And the girl we were driving with was like, I've never been there before. She's also born and raised in this community. Her mother was born and raised in this community. And to hear that she had never been to this incredibly gorgeous place and had those kinds of experiences was just kind of mind-blowing for me. And you have me on a bit of a rant and a ramble on this topic, because I'm really, really passionate about it. And it's kind of the roots of everything for me, with my love for plant medicine, my desire to inspire more people to use plant medicine so that we can make this world a better place. We can save this world. And I'm a firm believer that the more people we can connect, even those underserved children, the more of them that can get outside and say, wow, I didn't know that about these plants. Wow, let me touch these things. Let me feel these things. Let me taste these things. Hopefully, what that can do is inspire their love for this land and want to do what they can to protect it, because we really need that right now. Yeah, my heart gets mushy about that. But all of that being said, I think all of this already that we just shared. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your actual herbalism journey. I know you grew up with that connection to the plants, and I look at your background and see all of the good medicines sitting on your shelf there. And I just want to hear a little bit more, like, how did that come to be? How did you recognize that these plants were not only food, they're medicine? Tell me about that journey.
Yeah. So my parents they weren't really into herbalism necessarily. There's a lot of really wild food focus. I mean, we always call like chamomile tummy tea because I knew it would be good for your tummy and stuff. And so we had some mild understanding like that. But I say it really started, I've kind of like worked in every aspect in the herbal trade, so to speak. And my very first job was in high school, and I was a commercial wildcrafter. One of my friend's dad, he'd take us out in his van and he'd drive us around, and we'd just go out and we'd go harvest chanterelles, but we'd also be harvesting things like Oregon grape and cascara. And, his name was Bob, and he was kind of like a character, he's like, oh man, we got to get to the top of the hill before someone picks all those mushrooms before us. He was kind of like, almost like, if he wasn't a forager, he'd probably be a gambler or something. Cause it's always like a gamble when you go out there, get the early first mushrooms of the season, get the first morels, and they're like $32 a pound. Then by the time you get to the cellar, they've dropped down to like $2 or something like that. So, but he kind of showed me like, we got to work with like a lot of these medicinal herbs. And it was kind of interesting. I'm like, wow, like people want to pay money for Oregon grapefruit. Like this just grows everywhere. It's just kind of coats the forest floor, and we were just harvesting lots of it. And it was kind of interesting getting to see that. And so after high school, I graduated, where I got my GED, being honest. Yeah,
me too.
Yeah, I got to get out of that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I was not for the system.
Yeah, me neither.
I've got to go. Thank you.
Yeah. But then I started working at Mountain Rose Herbs, and I had the job as an herb cleaner. So they literally had me like sifting through hundreds of pounds of herbs a day. Like, all right, there's like, I think there might be some like little bits of like, debris in this like chamomile or this valerian or something. Like, can you just like clean these bags out and make sure they're all good? And I was also doing some quality control there. So I kind of got to see this other side of it from being in the woods, where it was like, you're out in the woods for like 12 hours a day, getting rained on and just doing really hard work for less than minimum wage, to like being in all of a sudden like, wow, this massive warehouse, just like full of just walls, just tall shelves with just like thousands of pounds of herbs, every herb that you could imagine, just from all over the world. And it was just kind of like, they had this like free shelf there. So things that got returned or they changed the lot number, it's like, all right, we're just going to put it on the free shelf for employees to go pick through. And we also got severe discounts. And so, I was just kind of like, Shatavari says herb of 1,000 husbands. Like, maybe I'll give that to my girlfriend or something like that. I was just kind of playing around with herbs like that way. Just kind of like see something on the shelf, Google it. Like, does that have any interest to me? And, being a young guy, I was like, oh yeah, rhodiola, they launched the Russian cosmonauts deep into space and it like gives you more endurance. So I'd be like taking like rhodiola and ginseng and genema and just like, or not genema, but gynostemma, pentaphyllum, and just like doing lots of workouts and long runs and things like that. So I kind of was like, wow, these herbs, like you actually feel them. And I was also totally admittedly like a little bit of a psychonaut. I was really interested in the consciousness altering aspects of plants. So it was like something that was a really thing I just loved researching, and just realizing that plants could like alter your consciousness in like what seemed like an infinite number of ways, and just getting to experience like all these different ways that plants could alter and change your consciousness, from making you like really stimulated to really sleepy to giving you visions. And it was just kind of, to me, that was just absolutely fascinating, and actually getting this direct experience. So you're kind of like, at first I had like this little apprehension to the idea that plants were like, could heal you. I was kind of like, at first I was a little skeptical, honestly. I was kind of like, yeah, this is probably something that like, wealthy liberals do to like, they buy all these supplements and they poop them right out and they think they're doing something. But then once I like was like realized like, wow, well, okay, this can alter my consciousness in a multitude of ways, and people are paying all this money. Like this whole giant company, Mountain Rose Herbs, would not exist unless these herbs are actually doing something. So it kind of opened me up to thinking more in that way. And I really cut my teeth into herbalism when I started going to the Columbine School of Botanical Studies. And it was one of those things where I'd kept running into people who went to that school. I'd be at like a party and I'd be talking to someone and they'd be like just dumping all this plant knowledge on me. I'm like, dang, like you're from California. Why do you know more about my native plants than I do? Like, oh, I went to Columbine's. And just kind of was like, I was like, all right, there's something to this school, because I keep meeting amazing people who went there and they just have like a tremendous amount of plant knowledge. So when I finally decided to go, it was just kind of for my own usage, because it's really botany heavy focused school. It's very field botany. Like we're out in the forest, we're learning to key out and identify plants. We're learning about their ecology. Then once we've kind of gained this, like gotten to know the plant in that way, then occasionally we get the opportunity to make medicine with it, make tinctures with it, make tea, make herbal oils with them. And so we were having this very direct experience. So, my teachers at the time were Howie Brownstein, who's like just gone over 40 years of teaching this. So, and Stephen Yeager and Heron Bray were just amazing teachers. I mean, someone like Howie, he was literally walking these trails for over 30 years. So every step of the way is like, he knew had seen this like clear cut go from like old growth tree to clear cut to now these trees are towering over our heads. Like that's how long he'd been doing this. So the amount of knowledge you gained from him. And, I honestly wasn't interested in clinical herbalism because, Howie was very realistic with us. He's like, yeah, it's pretty much, it was super hard. He said, it was talking about, he was just broke for long time. So he said it was like only recently is he kind of like finally making a livable wage, doing herbalism. It took him like a long time, especially starting out in the 80s when there's like not really anything going on like that. No one knows what an herbalist is, where today you can't throw a rock around Eugene without hitting an herbalist.
True.
But yeah. So I really got interested in clinical herbalism because I got into a second year program, and then he kind of had this option where like, hey, if anyone wants to work in the clinic, like you can come and work in the clinic and I'll like supervise, I'll kind of lead the thing and you'll kind of work alongside me. And so I was kind of like, oh, I'll give that a try. I'll see what that's like. I've like spent so much like over 2 years just studying these plants in Columbines, not to mention all the years before I was studying herbalism. And it was kind of like I got to work one-on-one with him, and I realized like, wow, this is actually really love this clinical aspect. And I'm like seeing like amazing results with the people I'm working with for all kinds of things, like, how we specialize in things like seizures. I'm like, what? Like herbs can work for seizures? And he's like, yeah, I'm one of the few herbalists who's not afraid to work with seizures. And it was just really incredible. And lots of stuff with like pre-diabetes, and just seeing people coming back, like even working with my own mother and seeing her go from pre-diabetic to normal blood sugar. So I got kind of like bitten by the herbalist bug that way, and just kind of showed me like, oh, actually, not only can these herbs like do all these like, acute things for us, whether that's for like boo-boos and owies and, relieving pain, or, giving us a little stimulation with our morning cup of coffee, but, they can also like deal with these long-term chronic health issues. So I'd say that's what kind of got me into it. And since then, I've been practicing clinical herbalism since 2018, and have a nice clinical practice. I work with a lot of local folks, but I also do stuff on Zoom. So it's been kind of cool to go from there and kind of build up my clinical experience over the years.
I love hearing those stories, and I love Howie. He's such an entertaining educator. He's super funny. I've taken a few classes with him. I always wanted to go to Columbine's, but it never worked out for me because it was down in Eugene and I was up in Portland at the time. And I still got a lot of field work. I did a lot of work at the Elderberry School of Botanical Medicine, and have a lot of friends and colleagues that went to Columbine's also. And yeah, it's really amazing when you get that teacher that has been so deep and connected with the areas in the land that you're learning about. Like, it makes such a world of difference. And listening to you talk about your journey in this, where you start from like, oh, plants are cool. Like, let me check these things out. You mean they do these things? Great. I'm just going to take them, which I think is where most people start, right? They like start learning, oh my gosh, there's natural ways to do all of these different things. And you get into the clinical world, and it is a different world. It's definitely more deep. And I love hearing you talk about how you helped your own mother with her, I think you said diabetes, or was it insulin resistance?
Yeah, pre-diabetes.
Yeah. It's beautiful to hear, because my mom, I've mentioned she lives a few miles away from you, and she's watched me on this journey over the last couple of decades. And some days she's like, yes, I believe in what you're doing. Or she'll try one of my old products and be like, text me and be like, oh my gosh, this thing worked for this. And I'm like, yes, Mom, I know. Like, I've been studying this for a very long time, and that's why I put it together. But it brings me to that like skeptical piece. And you had talked about being skeptical in the beginning. And I've got to ask you, do you sometimes still feel that skepticism with herbs? Like, oh, is it really going to work? Or are you just like, nope, I know it?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because sometimes I get like, almost like I just like have this expectation. Like, I had a coworker recently, and his pointer finger like swelled up like double the size. He just got some infection, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I got some 50/50 Oregon grape echinacea tincture here. Just drop a little bit on there as a liniment, and then take a little bit internally. And like, for him, he's like, whoa, you're like a witch doctor or something. It's like cleared up way faster than if I'd taken the antibiotics. That's amazing. And I was kind of like, yeah, that's just what that herb does. So there's part of me that has like almost this expectation. But every time, it's like I come into the clinic, and you just have like this person, they have this like laundry list of like issues that are going on. And you're just like, where do I even begin with this person? But then you're kind of like, well, if they have so much going on, like if I just throw something at it, it's like bound to like work with something. And if you try to focus on like what their main concern is, and so there is a part of me that's kind of like, oh, can I actually help this person? They got so much going on. And then when they like come back, and you're just like, come back for another consult, and they're just like, you're like, oh yeah, like this has been getting better. And like, you have them do things, you're like, oh wow, like they went from like things, like having someone tell you something like, oh, I thought I was like never going to have another kid again because I was always fatigued all the time and stuff. And now I'm thinking about having my second child, and you hear something like that, you're like, whoa, that's like pretty powerful. You don't always expect to hear those kind of things. So I kind of oscillate between the two, where it's just like, I've seen the herbs work enough time that I'm like, yeah, you got a UTI here, try some uva ursi, just like make some like Arctostaphylos into a tea, that should kick it right out, and just kind of like have this expectation that the herbs are going to work because you've seen them work so many times. But then also still at the same time, you're kind of amazed, like, wow, like I really made a difference in this person's life, and kind of ways you don't expect. Cause sometimes you're just like, oh, well, let's just give this protocol. Cause sometimes the first thing you offer that person is almost like part of the assessment, like, you give someone, you're like, well, I think like something's like telling me that agrimony's like coming up for me a lot now. Let's just give you some agrimony and see how that works. And then, sometimes it's like, wow, like I love that agrimony. Other times you're like, it's all right. And you're like, okay, let's try something different next time, and you can kind of like fine tune things that way. But yeah, I think that I mostly get more skepticism when it's a hard thing to do when you're a practitioner and you hear what other practitioners are doing, and you're like, oh, how could they think that was going to work really? Or like, like Howie wasn't into like eliminative diets and stuff and telling people you can't eat this, or this. And they're like only eating like a few foods now. And he's kind of like, no, you should bolster up that person, build up their vitality so they can eat those things. That was kind of his perspective and the perspective I came with. So sometimes you hear other practitioners, and, it's kind of almost part of my own like spiritual practice to learn to work on those feelings of judgment and skepticism towards what other practitioners are doing. Cause you realize like herbalism is just so vast. And sometimes it can be like that one client who came to see you and you did miracles for them. They went to see someone else and they were just like, yeah, that I can't work with that other person. And then vice versa. Some people come to work with you and they're like, I don't know, I'm kind of skeptical. Maybe I'll take the herbs for like a couple days. And if I don't feel anything like immediately, then I'm just going to like say it doesn't work and move on to the next practitioner. So I kind of try to keep that open mind and acceptance of, try to hush the skeptical voice, because I've seen a lot of things that have kind of like totally blown my mind. Like, I got into doing a pulse diagnosis, and I started doing some of I saw Liz Wolfe at the Good Medicine Confluence. I'd kind of followed some of her work with doing pulse testing. And I would never think you could actually cause change by just putting the bottle of tincture in someone's hands without administering anything. And that to me was like I was like, whoa, okay. I can just set a bottle of tincture in someone's hand, feel the change in the pulse, and actually see their complexion change, see like moisture come into their mouth. Like, I'm always being like totally blown away by these new things I'm seeing. And I've always been kind of into esotericism too. So I kind of realized there's a lot more going on in the world than the dominant reductionist, atheistic, materialist paradigm likes us to think there is. So that's kind of my rant on that question.
I love that. And it was a great rant. I love hearing about Liz Wolfe and teaching you on the pulse diagnosis and the holding of an herb. Like, I personally experience it on the regular with herbs that I have a very intimate relationship with. And now I can think about that herb and feel the calm in my nervous system. And that is amazing. And I remember when I first started recognizing that, that was a thing, was when I was running Mountain Mel's, my product line. And I had a tea I called Unfrazzle Your Dazzle. And it was all about helping you calm and chill out,
It's a great name.
Yeah, it was great. I always had fun with names when I ran that product line. And anyways, that particular tea was so amazing because people would come up to me at expos and events and whatever I was at and just be like, oh, I don't like tea or whatever. And I got to a point where I could just hold the tin of tea and show it to somebody and just, I would feel more calm. Or I'd let them smell the tea and I would watch them like take this deep sigh of relaxation and watch their shoulders drop down and just see them instantly go into a state of calm. And I'm like, that is powerful, gentle, yet powerful and amazing. And then I saw it with my own daughter. Like, she is somebody who is prone to anxiety, which will definitely go to tummy aches for her. And she'll, she doesn't do it so much anymore. But when she was younger, she'd be like, Mommy, she'd break down for whatever reason and be like, Mommy, my tummy hurts. And I would say, okay, I'll make you a cup of tea. And, she grew up like toddling around, and she would pull the chamomile flowers out of my tea and just eat them all of the time. And it got to a point where I'd make her a cup of tea, and then like it progressed. She would drink maybe a sip of the tea and be like, okay, everything's better. And now it's at that point where I can just say, hey, I'm going to get the water hot for your tea and we'll be okay. And I don't even have to go get the water hot. And she's just like, oh, okay, chamomile's coming to me. I'm going to be okay. And I love that plant is going to address her anxiety as well as the tummy ache all in one. So it's really cool. But I think about the skepticism thing too. And I think this is something that a lot of people turn to. And, of course, talking with you, you have a little bit more advanced perspective of it than most of the people that are going to be listening to this show. But I think the skepticism lives strong. And a lot of people that do listen to this show, they've been dabbling with herbs here and there. And then they have those people in their family that are like, yeah, you're kind of crazy, you woo-woo, witchy freak or whatever. And I still, to this day, will sometimes be like, no way that's going to work, but then it becomes intuitive after a while. I think you were kind of alluding to that in your chat as well, where you just know what plants are going to work in a given situation and you go with it, even when there's this little bit of inner doubt. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. You just adjust the protocol. But I don't know. I just feel like the skepticism is big for a lot of people, and a lot of people that listen to this show have to battle that. So
yeah, I think a lot of us identify as skeptics because, it's healthy to have some skepticism as things. But I think people misunderstand what skepticism really means. It's like really should bring out your critical thinking skills and sometimes be willing to say like, okay, like I heard this idea. I don't really know if it jives with me. And sometimes people think, oh, I'm skeptical, so it's got to be BS. Like I'm not going to buy that with anything. So, but really it means like, okay, well, do you have any experience in this? Have you experienced this for yourself? Do you know any people have experienced this? Or is this just something you're hearing and you think skepticism means like, well, if my BS meter is going off, then it's got to be that. But for me, I think skepticism saying like, well, I'm not quite sure about that. But then again, I don't have as much experience. So if I'm going to really make a hard, fast call on it, I have to talk to practitioners, get some firsthand experience myself. So I think that's a big issue I see because the difference between healthy skepticism and just being putting down what other people believe and what other people think on things that you literally have zero experience with is something that I'm seeing in this increasingly polarized way that we've been trying to speak to one another. So I think skepticism is healthy, but also understand what true skepticism is. Put the theory to the test.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective that I hadn't really thought about in that way. I love it. That's great. Just opening up the mind to checking out what's really going on and diving deeper, asking those bigger questions, not just blocking it out and saying, oh, yeah, that's against anything I know. So surely that can't work. So I think where I was coming from it is it's always fun to take those people that are questioning it and are like, no way this could work, or doubting it more would be the better perspective. And then, sharing something as simple as plantain and how it can help with drawing out a splinter, something that easy.
Right.
And then watching them just be completely mind blown and maybe opening their minds to the next time somebody comes at them with a plant friend to help them. Fun.
Right.
It's fun. I nerd out on it entirely too many ways, that's for sure. Gosh, I feel like it would be really fun to walk in the forest with you and learn what you know about plants and connect and all of those kinds of things. And I would love to hear more about what you do with your experience, with your knowledge, and how you help people, and how anybody that maybe is listening could learn more about you.
Yeah. So I have my company is No Tai Botanica. No Tai is spelled Noti. So Noti Botanica. And just from my website, notaibotanica.com, I kind of offer, that's where you can find out more about my clinical herbal consultations. I also have a selection of products. I even do some my actual background. I also did a lot and worked for a lot of different herb farms. Richo Czech was someone I worked with for years, and have a degree in horticulture, Morgan State University. So I do also offer some landscape design kind of work, permaculture design. I got studied with Andrew Millison, so I've getting really into that work. I even do some astrology consultations as well, believe it or not. So I'm very into the Hellenistic tradition of astrology, which kind of dates back to the 4th century BCE, which is kind of like really the roots where we see modern horoscopic astrology develop. And for me, I'm kind of someone I see history as something that's all very alive and practicing living traditions. History is not something that's dead in the annals of time. So yeah, so those are some of the things I offer: making products, clinical herbal consultations. That's a big part. And education, I'd say, is for a really big part of my practice. So I've been doing lots of work with the Herbal Academy recently. So we have I've been working on a permaculture gardening course that's going to be coming out next year with them, written portion and a bunch of video classes. And I have a bunch of video herbal monographs. So, and I do some stuff with Herb Rally as well. So I kind of work with various educational platforms. I also work with Herb Farm. So many herbs to remember: Herbal Academy, Herb Rally, Herb Farm. So yeah, so I work with a lot of different things, and I offer a lot of education. So if anyone wants to see my upcoming classes or check out any other podcasts or YouTube things I've been featured on, or is interested in scheduling consultation, I just say, go to my website. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. And your website's beautiful. I love the upper view of the forest going on in your homepage. It's really beautiful. And I wanted to just mention quickly before we kind of wrap this up, what are some of the things that are really special about the products that you do have available? Because I think it's pretty darn cool. I believe you grow and forage most of the medicine that you share with people. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty much 99% of everything I have is all either wildcrafted from, this bioregion of the Pacific Northwest, or was grown in our small little homestead, which isn't certified organic, but trust me, we're more organic than most things that say they're organic. We don't even spray organic pesticides or anything like that. So very, make lots of small batch herbal formulas. We do some flower essences. We do some herbal oils and salves and things like that. And I do actually do some work with astrological timing as well. So sometimes you'll notice on a lot of my bottles of herbs, I'll usually have an astrological symbol, a little sigil put on there to show kind of what archetype I'm trying to put into that medicine. So for instance, for a liver formula, you'll see a symbol for Jupiter on there, because Jupiter deals with excess and expansion and connects with the liver and the body, and according to traditional medical astrology. So I kind of do that. And I've been studying with Robert Allen Bartlett recently. So I've been getting more into making spagyrics, and I've always been interested in alchemy, but I've been kind of going deeper down that path. Right now it's more for my own personal use, but I do work with certain alchemical principles like that. So
awesome. I bet your medicine is amazing. I kind of want to connect my mother with you, because she doesn't want to listen to me so much, but maybe she would listen to somebody outside of me. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance and your wisdom and your stories and your experience on the show. I really appreciate it. And it's so good to hear about it all.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link to your website. I believe you have a YouTube channel and Instagram as well, to make sure that anybody can connect with you. And then I have a lot of people that reach out to me for consultations, but I'm currently not doing them. So maybe I'll send some referrals your way if there's particular ailments and people that you like to work with.
Yeah, you can read on my website. It kind of says my main specialties. So yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Logan.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You as well.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of The Herbalist Path. If you're loving this journey and learning all about the various aspects of herbal medicine, be sure to follow and review the show. It helps more people find their own path with herbal medicine. And if you have a friend or know a mama or another budding herbalist who could use this kind of support, please share this episode with them. And that way, we can keep making herbalism spread like wildflowers. And a gentle reminder, nothing shared on this podcast is intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. All the information is for educational purposes only. And yeah, we throw in some entertainment too. But what it is not is a substitute for personalized care from a qualified health practitioner. Always do your own research. Listen to your body. And when needed, partner with a trusted professional who honors both your intuition and your health. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep walking down the herbalist path. Growing your own medicine is one of the more empowering things that you can do for yourself and for your family. And sometimes it can get a bit overwhelming, thinking suddenly you have to grow all the different herbs, but you really don't have to. I like to keep mine fairly concise, and then whatever I don't have time or space to grow, I will go gather from organic herb farms like Oshala Farm. But if you wanted to know some of my top herbs that are must-haves in my own personal garden, I do have a family herb gardening guide for you. It is a free download, and I will put a link to it in the show notes so that you can start growing your own good medicine too. Enjoy.